Good morning, Gamecock fans. Today is Wednesday, wide open Wednesday, August 13th, the year of our Lord 2025, and this is Coffee with JC Shurburtt. First, want to apologize for yesterday. I have an iMac, an older computer that I record this stuff on, and it decided to retire yesterday. I had a 40-minute episode, just got lost somewhere on the iCloud. Wasn't the best episode anyway. I didn't think it was kind of I talked about season openers and sort of the struggles and reversing the trends and all that good stuff. We can revisit that closer to the actual Gamecock season opener, but frustrating. Didn't get to do the show yesterday, but did go make a purchase and back in the saddle. Not all the way back. I've got to get my green screen taken care of, and I need a couple of additional wires to look like I normally look, both here and on Inside the Gamecocks show, but certainly happy to be with you today. Those of you that are listening on podcast, it doesn't matter because you can't see me anyway. And we certainly appreciate all of our listeners here on Coffee and the show and all that. So just a bump in the road that happens. It's unfortunate that it was in August. I knew that the time was near for that computer, but I was kind of hoping it would just make it through the season, right? So we buy it in February, buy a new one in February or whatever, because you go on 10 years without buying a computer, and you buy a new one, and you don't have the same kind of plugs to fit with your equipment and things like that. So interesting day yesterday, but back in the saddle again. It's Wednesday. That means lots of stuff going on the Chief Sports Network and the BigSpur.com, especially this time of year where we are 17, 18 days from kickoff. I keep saying 17 because week one starts on Saturday the 30th, and my brain is trying to adjust on South Carolina playing on a Sunday. I know that intellectually. It's just offhand. Oh, the 30th is when football starts. It's like Pavlov's dog. But anyway, that's where we're at. And so certainly not a good time to take a break, but a good time to have a wide open Wednesday on the Chief Sports Network. That means on the morning show and the show, you can get into the Nana Sports chat box, no matter who you are. If you're not a Club Chief member, if you like to get in every day, you can join on the YouTube channel for $4.99 a month. But we enjoy wide open Wednesdays. Also, already out, dropped this morning early, Tailgate Talks, Pat DeMarco, Steven Garcia. You can get the audio podcast version on the Chief Sports app. That's a free download. Go to their YouTube channel, Tailgate Talks 547. You got to use the @ so it's youtube.com @Tailgate Talks 547 to get the video there. Or if you're a Gamecocks Plus subscriber, you can get the edited version. I guess the raw version is on YouTube. The edited version is there. And they had Lenore Sellers and Case and Henry on, and then that was tremendous. Tremendous interview. Just got finished listening to a bunch of stuff, including that. They had Marcus Lattimore the first week, so check that out. Late night Gamecock show tonight, following Sports Talk at 8 p.m. with Matt and Alex, and so a full day there. But enough of all that. We got to dive in to football. And instead of taking a big topic today, I'm just going to kind of go through some items of interest. So that's kind of what we're going to do today because it's ongoing. There was media availability yesterday. Shane Beamer had a press conference. Several players talked. Lots of intel coming in from the scrimmage that we've had all over the place. And I want to start out with the offensive line. And, this position is going to, for lack of a better term, have a lot of conversation. And it's because the Gamecocks have struggled there. And everybody's concerned about it. I mean, when you give up that many sacks, and Lenore Sellers was pressured as much as he was, according to PFF, if you follow that, I mean, it was one of the highest in the country's pressure rates. So the pass blocking has to get better. The run blocking disappointed me at times. I don't think you can argue with how they run blocked against Texas A&M, maybe Vanderbilt, but they didn't get a push sometimes. last year when they probably should have relative to their talent and who they were playing. So the whole offensive line needs to get better. Well, the good news is I think it's well on its way, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And you hear the players talk, and some of my feedback from the scrimmage that I talked about on Monday was it's further along at this point in camp than it has been at any point in the last 4 years, and that's good because what you want on your offensive line, obviously, is one guy can make a mistake and it's a disaster. It's a unique position like that. And sometimes offense is like that in general. If a receiver runs a wrong route, everybody can execute perfectly. The other 10 guys, quarterback can throw it to the right place, and it's a pick. Especially like when Steve Spurrier was here. If you ever noticed in his offenses at Florida and South Carolina, you would see the quarterback and you would just wonder what in the world, because there's no receiver in the area. And the quarterback would just throw it, and it's a pick or where are you throwing or whatever. Well, that's because in that system, you're taught to throw to a spot, and it's up to the receiver to run the right route. And in many cases in Spurrier's system, the receiver's running option routes and having to make the right. I mean, that system was a little more complicated for receivers than maybe the quarterback. That's why you'd see it. That was a mistake on the receiver, wasn't the quarterback's fault. And so on offense in general, one screw up can screw up your whole play. And that's sort of the issue sometimes with the offensive line. One guy makes a mistake, and sometimes it's not an offensive lineman. Sometimes it's a tight end or a back, or quarterback holds the ball too long, that kind of thing. So, when you think about it, when you're watching plays live, and I'm guilty of this just like everybody else, you look at it and it's like, well, the line just sucks. Well, on that particular play, four out of five did very well. One guy messed it up. So I say that to say this: what you want when you're talking about the offensive line being ahead or at a better spot that they were, in camp last year, that's that cohesiveness you're talking about. That means, well, we don't have the one guy breaking down in a lot of instances and things like that. So that's good. Yeah, I'm not saying it's perfect because it's obviously not. They're facing a defensive line that should be formidable this year. Casey Henry, very good interview on Tailgate Talks, but also in his media availability, talked about Dylan Stewart and going against him. You go against that guy every day. There's probably very little chance he doesn't get the best of you, at least some. So I'm certainly not saying it's perfect and we're going to see like the Hogs from the Redskins back in the day with this bunch. But I think if it could at least get to not a liability, then the offense can do a lot of good things this year. And some of it's on the quarterback as well. Leroy Sellers, according to some of the advanced metrics, had more time, held on to the ball sometimes. And that's one thing they've worked with him on quite a bit. But I put out a little piece on thebigspur.com yesterday for VIP members with some, I guess you could call it intel, progress report, whatever, a projection. And, things are probably a little different than what maybe we anticipated in the preseason. And a lot of it has to do with true freshman offensive lineman Shedric Sarratt Jr. from Gaffney. And you've heard me talk about him several times since the spring, and the feedback on him has been tremendous. He won the newcomer of the spring. They brought in, over Boaz Stanley and some of those other guys over the whole offense, all the freshman receivers. And listening to Casey Henry, in his press conference, he was asked about Shed, and he said he's a dog. And that's usually, a good sign. So I projected him to right now. I think at left guard, Shed could be the starter. In fact, I think right now he's probably a slight favorite over Nick Sharp, the Wake Forest transfer. Nick missed the spring. Would things be different now if it wasn't? I don't know. I said on the Big Spur, the Shed Surratt thing is much more about, because you always kind of get concerned, right? When a true freshman offensive lineman, wow. I mean, it happens at bigger programs quite a bit. They recruit good players, and these guys come in, they're better, but then the other good players they've recruited, so they start them. And that's much more about like what I think's I'm told is happening here. It's just that if he starts, he's just the best one, and he's 6'4". He's 336 pounds. Just a little background on him. He's from Gaffney. He started at tackle for his high school team when he was a freshman in high school. And for those of you from South Carolina that are familiar with South Carolina high school football, that's pretty rare at Gaffney High School. Those guys, they know ball. That's a good program. It's a great program. I want to give a shout out to my buddy Jason. You guys probably know him as Chicken Fan on the websites. He hit me up when Shed was a freshman. Said, "Hey, look at this guy," and ended up at South Carolina. Got in a battle with Colorado, NIL-wise and stuff. That kind of entered the chat behind the scenes, but he ended up as a South Carolina Gamecock, and he's set it on fire since he's been on campus, and it's kind of been understated, hadn't talked about it yet. And really, I'm going to get to this in a second. The question was, where is Tree going to play? That's been kind of the linchpin here. And he's worked some at guard. He's worked some at right tackle. I've felt like since the spring, because before the spring, Tree was basically a left tackle and then a left guard, left side, And last year they didn't cross train hardly at all. And so I didn't know if maybe he was kind of just a left side guy, and they'd plug him in at guard and blah, blah, blah. Well, with Case and Henry missing the spring, Tree got a ton of reps at right tackle. And that's a battle too, I'm going to get to in a second. So with him out of the mix, it's basically Sharp and Sarratt. Marquis Anderson, I believe, got to confirm this, but I believe is going to back up Trovon Ball, who's had a big summer and ready to go start, reshaped his body on the right side. Marquis played left guard last year. So, and I said that's speculation on my part, trying to put, so maybe I'm wrong about Marquis. But, so it's between Sharp and Sarratt at left guard. So there you go. Josiah Thompson, big summer for him too. Nobody's going to beat him out at left tackle. If something happens to him, it's going to be interesting to see because Jatavius Shivers is working, and he's kind of again, this is kind of like the Marquis Anderson. I think he's working both sides. And then on the right side, so would they move Tree to left tackle and plug in Henry? Would that be their best guy? I don't know. Probably. I would guess that would be it because Tree has played left tackle several times in the offense. So left guard, true freshman, or Wake Forest transfer Nick Sharp, who only gave up 2 sacks and 481 snaps, passing snaps per PFF at Wake Forest. So good hands there. And again, look, if people can say what they want about coaching and decisions and stuff like that, but you're not going to throw a true freshman out there to play over a guy that's given up very few sacks in his career and played over 700 snaps at 340 pounds in the ACC last year, unless the freshman is just, like Case and Henry said, a dog. So, that's kind of how this works. So, the chances of Sarratt starting, if he's not absolutely the best one, are slim. It's slim, but if he does start, you'll know that. And like I said, it could be that Sharp ends up getting the guy. I mean, it just kind of depends. We're only 10 days into practice. We've had one scrimmage, but the Sarratt thing's been brewing since the spring. I mean, he's a player that they really, really like. And sometimes it just happens that way, folks. I mean, I know he wasn't a 5-star guy, and, the recruiting media industry was kind of late on him. He got a late invite to the Navy All-American Bowl and, ended up going from like a mid high 3-star, low 4-star to like inside the top 200. Yeah, they do rankings so early. Gosh, there's a 2028 list coming out today. I don't know. And then people don't want to be wrong, so it's hard for guys to drop. And what goes up. If you go up, if somebody goes up, somebody has to go down. And so I don't know. He's probably just a lot better than everybody thought. Just to be honest, I mean, he didn't have like a big offer. Clemson didn't offer him. Tennessee, Colorado, I think came in. So this guy, I think the Gamecocks knocked it out of the park with him. 336 pounds, and I said this on an episode a long time ago. A coaching friend of mine went to Gaffney High School, watched him play basketball. He jumped two-hand dunk. I mean, basketball equates to athleticism on the offensive line. That is a fact, folks. So watch that left guard battle. That circle that one. I think, and we'll get to right tackle in a second. Like I said, Josiah Thompson, barring something unforeseen like injury, I think he's locked in at left tackle. It would take something crazy, some kind of Herculean performance between now and the end for him to get beat out. I think the same's true with Boaz Stanley, who is really a player they're excited about at center. He's been, Beamer called it the starting center for a while. Right guard, Trevon Ball. I can't see anybody overtaking him. That's an opinion. Again, there's another scrimmage or two. And then right tackle. Let's get to that because, Big Tree, I've talked about him, Babalade. It's pronounced one of those. I need to go look at the pronunciations that Steve Fink had in his guide, right? Come on, JC. But the guy's been there 3 years. But Tree and then Case and Henry, who started all 13 games last year. Now, let me just say this. I know Cason's one of those guys that, because there was pressure coming off the right side last year. Never mind, tight ends line up there. It wasn't all him, that kind of thing. I think he's a really good player. I think that there were some growing pains, obviously, with everybody on that offensive line last year. It was his first year as a starter. He's improved, but it becomes, as Lonnie Keasley says, it's a meritocracy, and it just becomes about who the best player is, right? And Tree has had some big moments here in his short career as a true freshman. I mean, he's national 24/7 Sports National True Freshman of the Week for what he did at Georgia. I mean, you look back on that Georgia game, Carolina lost the game. They just didn't have enough firepower. And the defense that year probably wasn't. I mean, Georgia scored 21 nothing the second half and won 24-14 after the Gamecocks had a lead. But TJ Sanders and Tree in that game, you look back on it against that group, very talented Georgia group. I mean, they more than held their own. That was a good sign. Now, true freshman year, that offensive line, he got banged up against Missouri, sort of inconsistent, but battled hard, and it was left tackle. Last year, red shirts. Okay. Josiah Thompson gets hurt against Vanderbilt. He comes in, plays fantastic. Next week, he's starting against Missouri. Still maintained his red shirt, plays the whole game, and he played outstanding. They didn't get a whole lot. There were some plays they got some pressure, but it wasn't like Lenoris was running for his life, especially first half, where Sellers was able to set up and throw, pass protection. And Missouri's got a really good defensive line. And they got a really good one this year with some even better players like Damon Wilson that they got from Georgia. So that's going to have to hold up. So he ends up redshirting and then go to spring and he's working right tackle. Well, that creates a competition. And so right now I'd give him the edge at right tackle. And I'll say this, Tree and Trevon Ball, when people talk about him, they say Tree and Tro, right? Tree and Tro. Those two had the best summers they've had since they've been here. And this is something that kind of gets lost, I think, when you're talking about players and offensive linemen and development. What Beamer said in the press conference was they weren't like healthy enough to go the full mile, the full Monty, so to speak. with Luke Day's summer workouts. And that's critical for an offensive lineman. It's all about strength and flexibility and athleticism and getting your body right, that kind of thing. So they weren't able to go through the whole thing last offseason. I think that's one thing that led to the Tree red shirt thing. I remember he was banged up in a blue jersey or whatever at the beginning of last fall camp. And Ball was the same way. So that's why those guys went from freshman starters to, Travon or Tro was behind Torricelli Simpkins and, Tree redshirted. Well, you go into your third year offensive lineman, unless you're Shedric Sarratt or Josiah Thompson, obviously, that's go time. And they were able to participate. And, Travon Ball's a big boy. And Shane Beamer talked about him reshaping and getting some of the fat off, getting the muscle on, that kind of thing. And so, man, that's good. Because, I thought Travon Ball popped up on some freshman All-American, freshman All-SEC teams because he started a bunch of games too, along with Tree. And that's exciting about that position at right guard. Torricelli Simpkins doing really well with the New Orleans Saints. Hope he makes the team. I wouldn't be surprised he did. I've always been high on him. Maybe a little too high as far as last year goes, because I went back and, when you're watching tape, so offensive linemen, when they jump out at you, it's easy to get attached to that. And it's easy to kind of maybe not focus as much on the bad ones. And that's offensive line, and that's tough. That's why it's probably not my best position as an evaluator. Was not my best position to evaluate. But this guy did really well, Simpkins, at times, but then other times he was a little lost. And so, I'm not saying Travon Ball is going to be as good or as talented. I'm just saying that there was work to be done at right guard last year, despite Torricelli Simpkins being, a third team All-SEC selection at the end. And so maybe that will be an upgrade too as far as consistency goes. I know he's bigger. Travon Ball's 335 pounds, and I think Torricelli was 308. So that's 27 more pounds. And they're all bigger. You're going from like 305 to 336. Even if Sarratt doesn't get it, Sharp's 340. So you're going up 30 pounds at left guard. Josiah Thompson's put on about 25 pounds of muscle at left tackle. Center is going from around 300 with Rashawn Lee to 325 with Boaz Stanley. It's 308 to 330 at guard. And then if Babalade, the wins right tackle, he's about 25 pounds bigger than Kaysen. If not, Kaysen's 310, athletic enough to get out there and do it. So it's going to be a bigger offensive line, but some of these guys, especially on the projected right side with Tree and Tro right now, also put in the work athletically. So that's good. That's pretty much exciting. Switching over to running backs, I have nothing on Rasul Faison, obviously. Interesting about Oscar Attaway, though. Now, I was in Columbia in June and talked to, a couple of folks, and they all brought up his name and said, don't count him out. Everybody's talking about Faison. And then we talked about Isaiah Augustov on Monday, and he had a really good scrimmage. And you guys know I've always been high on Jawarn Howell and Matthew Fuller. Matthew Fuller had a good scrimmage. I didn't hear anything about Jawarn. That didn't mean he didn't have a good scrimmage. I think he's got a lot of talent. But with Oscar specifically, he pointed out in his media availability that he was in a boot for the Citrus Bowl. So was not healthy and was very honest about that. 14 carries, 69 yards, and a lot of it, more than half, came on a 36-yard touchdown run. He's able to get to the end zone. He caught 7 passes in the game. So, you think about Attaway when he came in, it was strange to me in a way, because Rocket was going to be the starting running back, right? But what was explained about Attaway, his plays and yardage and performance in the games didn't really match, how high they were on him coming in. I had one guy say he was a one and done guy. that I trust that's spot on, that would know. Um, Attaway would be NFL bound after last season. And we didn't really see that, I think around midseason, just like the rest of the offense in the Alabama game. He caught a couple of screen pass and he kind of found his groove there and he got in as and that's had some nice moments. Then in the Clemson game, man, your yards per carry were higher than Rockets. I mean, I think we saw the guy. And then in the Citrus Bowl, honestly, stats wise, he played his butt off, especially to have been in a walking boot. So he said he's healthy. And he's been getting some praise and all that. So that's another one to kind of add to the mix. I think, based on what I've been, if Faison for some reason is not able to go, and Faison does have a shoulder bruise right now, so who knows? I think Attaway will be the starter. They believe he's the most complete of the backs. Does everything well. But I think you will also see a heavier rotation this year with the backs. Last year, I thought Marquette Blackwell did the right thing. If you have Rocket, you give it to Rocket. Congratulations to Rocket on the touchdown the other night, too. Looked like some of the plays he made at South Carolina, just bounced it outside and showed that speed to get to the corner and scored for the Chargers. But, when you don't have Rocket, I think, hey, you rotate a little bit more. And I feel like that's probably what's going to happen a little bit this year. Faison, obviously, if he gets back and gets healthy and is eligible, could still be the number one back. The bruised shoulder, Beamer said it wasn't a big deal. He could still go play and all that. That's still, I don't know. As far as starting that first game, maybe that throws it into question, even if he is eligible. I don't know. I mean, I can see a situation where Attaway starts and the next series Faison's in, or Faison starts and they rotate, whatever. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But I did not know Attaway was ailing a little bit at the bowl. That explains some things. Still, I mean, I think to be not 100%, that's a pretty good game for him. You still got to block. I don't know that outside of the long run that the run blocking was outstanding in the bowl. I thought the pass blocking was actually really good. Beamer also said about Sellers in his press conference, they do 2-minute or situational football. And, one of the biggest takeaways from that was that he said Sellers is grasping it and boom, boom, boom. So the processing time, which is kind of probably what, I know definitely what led to some of the sacks last season. That's getting there. Nick Harbor having a really good camp. I think that Jared Brown is another guy maybe we haven't talked about that's turning some heads. I think the veterans probably will be the starters. I think Brian Rowe, Donovan Murph, Malik Clark, maybe Pup Sellers, Lex, all those guys will play. Maybe not all 6 of them, but I think it's going to be the rotation at receiver is going to be interesting too, because you can't rotate too many, right? Because guys got to get into rhythm and get out there and get to play. But Mazio Bennett's had a good. So I think Bennett, Brown, Harbor are probably your 3 if they start 3 wide in a 3 wide receiver set. Probably your 3 wide receivers. So there's some notes. That's where things are. Practice continues to roll on. School starts next week, and that kind of gets in. They'll do a mock game week next week, and then really start diving into Virginia Tech about 10 days out, game prep. This next scrimmage Saturday, coming up this Saturday, that's kind of separation Saturday, folks. That's they start. Oh, one more thing. And I usually don't talk about this until like the end or 10 days before kickoff. Special teams. I do that on purpose. It's kind of an inside joke. But the special teams look pretty good during the scrimmage. I mean, they're and I had a note here. I wrote down sunshine. It's almost eerie a little bit that like the stuff you hear this year out of fall camp, and it's not some may say, well, it's just been quiet. Well, yes and no. I mean, there's been just a lot of positivity. That doesn't mean there's not any bad plays. That doesn't mean we couldn't go rolling up into practice, a group of us, and go, oh, this guy's really struggling. I mean, it doesn't mean that, but like there seems to be more answers than questions this year. And I don't remember a Carolina football offseason, even under Steve Spurrier, where in the preseason, because even under Spurrier, I was kind of oh, gosh, who's going to play corner, that kind of thing. Some of those years where there's just not an answer, right there. And what does that mean? I don't know. Could mean 6-6 against a tough schedule. Could mean 11-1. Could mean a lot. I mean, who knows? The outcome, this does not affect the outcome. This just means there's answers, and they will use those answers to go compete when they play Virginia Tech on Sunday. Okay, hope you enjoyed this episode of Coffee. Coffee is a podcast. You can get it on the Inside the Gamecocks podcast channel. Please go rate us 5 stars. Don't write a bad review. Write a good one. You can also get it on YouTube. Please like, subscribe, and share. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll be back this afternoon first, though, for Inside the Gamecocks, the show with the Mad Dog. Hopefully with my coffee background back and all that good stuff. But just had to kind of use the alternative setting today for all this. I actually don't mind this. It helps me look at the camera a little more. I'm not looking down all the time, right? Anyway, the morning show starting at 10, the show after that, late night Gamecock show tonight at 8. Check out Tailgate Talks, download the Chief Sports app. All that happiness. We will be back, or I will be back tomorrow morning with coffee, and we'll see you around noon for the show. This has been Coffee with JC Shurburtt. Have a great, great wide open Wednesday, everyone. Holla at you soon.